The two most important tools that you have as a sound engineer are going to be EQ and compression. So what is compression? Compression, think of it as automated volume control, like we were just talking about. It basically, or it's like a robotic fader or something like that that says, oh, this is too loud, I'm going to bring it down a little bit. I hear that it's too loud, I'm going to bring it down, but then I'm going to bring it back up, and I'm going to ride my fader to make sure that it's at a very consistent, smooth volume. So that's what a compressor does. It basically says, once it gets so loud, I want you to automatically bring down that volume for me, so that when the vocalist hits a loud part, we want the compressor to kick in so that I don't have to be there jumping on the fader automatically, that the compressor is going to do that for me. So that's a really good spot that you want to be in with compression, is making sure that the compressor is doing a lot of that volume riding for you. Okay, so that's basically what compression is in a nutshell. Now, too much compression can ruin a dynamic performance. You know, there's a lot of ups and downs in the music. Too much compression can suck the life out of that. So you don't want too much. But not enough can allow for those distracting fluctuations where all of a sudden this one part or this patch gets really loud. Or he's been singing soft, and then when he sings loud, it's like, oh, that's too loud. So compression is going to do the job of making sure that it's at a more even level. Now, let's go into the parameters of what compression is. We're going to go back to our main mix here, and let's look at our kick drum, for example. So we've got our ratio, we've got our attack, our release, and then our makeup gain. So let's talk about each one of these. The threshold says, when the volume gets to this point, the threshold, I want you to actually start making it quieter for me. That's what the threshold is. That's all it does. It says, at what point do you think it's too loud? That's where we're going to set our threshold. Usually, if a vocalist is singing normal, I want the threshold to be above where they're singing. So it's not compressing when they're singing normal. But when they sing loud, I want the compressor to kick in. So I'm going to set my compressor to where they sing loud. And that's when I have people check during the sound check. This is where I was talking about, this is where I normally do my compression during my gain staging, because it's part of the same thing. I want to get my gain to where it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to jump right to my compressor to have them keep going, hey, hey, hey. Give me some loud checks so that I can set my compressor to where when they get loud, it starts to compress. And that's what the threshold is for. Multiband compression is the next level of that, which basically says, I want to compress different frequencies differently. If the low end is something I feel like I need to compress, I'm going to say between whatever, 200 and 400 hertz is where I'm going to have a band set up. And I'm going to use all my compressor the same thing, except it's only going to affect that one band of frequencies. It's not going to affect the whole thing, right? So if there's a loud, sharp point up here, it's going to ignore that because it only cares about these frequencies. So that's basically all a multi-band compressor is. You set up your different points of compression, and the compressor does the same thing. So let's keep going on the parameters of what a compressor does. So we figured out our threshold. That's where we want the compression to start. When do we want to start squishing those peaks? The ratio is how much. How much do we want to squish it? 2 to 1 is a pretty safe ratio where you're barely going to hear that. You're probably not going to hear that. Typically for vocals, I like to start at 4 to 1. That's pretty aggressive, and it might be different for recording. But I want to have control of what's happening through the speakers. It's something you don't want to hear. If you're compressing right, you don't hear it. And so that's kind of counterintuitive, right? It's like, well, I can't tell if I'm doing anything. But you want to be going for between, I'd say, -2 to -6 decibels of gain reduction. So when it hits that threshold that you've decided, and it goes above that, I want it to bring down between -2 and -6 decibels. Now that's for every instrument, for everything. That's kind of where I'm going for. If it starts to go in that -8 range, it starts to sound compressed, and we don't want that. We don't want that compressed sound. We want compression to be invisible. And good compression sounds like it's not even there. Okay, so attack, now that's something is like, at what point do we want, how fast do we want the compressor to kick in? As soon as it hears something? As soon as it hits that threshold? Or do we want to give it a little bit before it starts kicking so it gives a smoother transition? So as a general rule, I like to, anything that has a sharp transient, like a kick drum, any drum, sometimes like funky slap bass or something like that, where I want that bow, bow, bow. That's when I want a slower attack, so I can let that transient through, the boom. That's the part I want to get through. Then I want it to clamp down and compress everything after that right away. On something like vocals, I want to go maybe down, 10 milliseconds, maybe less. I want you to start compressing as soon as you hit the threshold. The release is just what you'd think. How fast, once it falls below the threshold, do you want it to release and go back to normal? A quick release I like to use on stuff like drums. I want it to let the transient through, compress the rest, and then let go again, because we're going to have another hit coming really soon. If I had this way up here like this, the release, it might still be compressing in between snare hits. I don't want that. I want it to let go of the compressor and then come back in. So on a snare drum or something like that, I'm going to have a pretty quick release. Let's say something like 30 milliseconds. Now, kind of what release setting that I want for something like vocals, where it's not a sharp transient. We have kind of a longer tone going on. I tend to set somewhere between 100 milliseconds and 300 milliseconds, depending on what kind of song it is. If it's a quick, punchy song like ba-da, ba, 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 da, I might go with a quicker release, because I want that thing to let go before they say their next note. If they're like the slow blah, 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 I might set a slower release on that, because I don't want that compressor to drop down too quickly, because you'll hear what's called pumping. And if you look into compression, you can hear what pumping sounds like online. Now, because I am compressing that volume, I'm losing gain, right? It's going to be quieter. So if I'm compressing between -2 and -6 decibels, maybe I want to make up somewhere in between that. So I usually set my makeup gain in between that, which is right about 3 decibels maybe, 2.5. And that puts me about back where I was compression-wise. So that's the parameters of compression. Again, it's just an automatic volume fader for you that smooths out the sound. And if you're doing it right, you can't hear it. Okay, so some compressors have a mix function. Like, how much of that do you want in there? How much of the compressed sound do you want in there? Sometimes you don't want 100%. Sometimes you want 80% or 70% or 50%. So this one doesn't have that function on it. It's not a super compressor. Really good compressors typically have that, so you can blend in how much of that compressed sound you want. The knee, you'll see something called the knee. It's like the hard knee or the soft knee. You can see the difference there. There's a soft knee. It's like kind of where it hits that threshold. Do you want it to kind of like slowly bend around the corner, or do you want it to take a sharp turn? That's basically what the knee is. It literally took me like years and years to figure out what compression does. And now it makes perfect sense, but if it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. Just keep researching it, keep trying to understand it, and you'll get there. The parameter part of it can be really confusing, and it took me forever to learn it, and for whatever reason, I just couldn't compute. So don't get discouraged, just stick with it if it doesn't make sense right now. Okay, so what we're looking for is this band on the right. There's the 2 bands that are lighting up, the 2 input LEDs that are lighting up when he's hitting, and then the third one is how much reduction we're getting. You can also see it on the fader right here. At the very bottom, you see that on the bottom there, the 1, 5, 10, 20 on the bottom of this channel. That's also your gain reduction. So we want to look for that gain reduction and see where we're at. Go ahead, Raj. And what I'm going to do is move the threshold down until it starts compressing. Oh, there it is. Now, we can go ahead and stop, Raj. Unfortunately, this compressor doesn't tell me exactly how many decibels I'm reducing. I just have to look at it on a scale here from 0 to -10. You see how they left out all that important, 2 and 3 and all the stuff that we really care about? You have to just kind of use your ear and your eyes on a board like this, unfortunately, because you can't get in it. I want to see if it's hitting -2. I want to see if it's hitting -4. I have to just kind of guess on this one. Keep going, Raj. Keep moving that threshold down. Okay, it was starting to hit -10. That's too much, right? So we're going to move it back up. Okay, and again, if we were doing this during the gain staging, make sure you're kicking it hard, because if not, if he's checking soft and then we get to the song and it's like boom, 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 and it's like all of a sudden it's super compressed. We're getting like 20, 30 decibels of compression. That's way too much. Okay, so that's why we always check at a super hard level. Now let's go ahead and set our quick release using what I said. We want that 4-to-1. I might even go a little bit higher on a kick, maybe 5-to-1. Really control that kick and how it's going. The attack, again, we want that to be a little bit slower, closer to 50 milliseconds, or maybe between 20 and 50 or something like that. You'll have to hear to where the transient wants to be through. So go ahead and keep kicking, Raj. Now it's bypassed. And let's turn it on. Anybody hear a difference? A little bit? Good. You want to hear a difference in volume. You don't want to hear a difference in tone. Now let's overcompress it. Hear what that sounds like. Go ahead, Raj. I'm going to turn it up so we can hear it just a little bit better. Now let's overcompress it. It's too much. We want more of that natural sound, so we're going to set it right about there. That looks pretty good. All right, now we're going to quickly move through everything and try to follow me here. Let's go with the snare. Okay, good. Let's move on to tom 1. It might be a little hot in general. Okay, tom 2. Might be a little hot. All right, good. On an overhead, I kind of like to overcompress because it creates this kind of cool pumping, like plah, plah, plah kind of effect. It's pretty cool. I'll show you what I mean here. Go ahead, Raj. Nice, Raj. Thank you. Bass. I'm going to set a longer release on bass because the notes tend to linger on, right? So we're going to set closer to 200, between 200 and 300. Now, the attack is really important on the bass because do you want that transient on the bass to come through or do you not? So in a recording environment, it's really important to make that distinction. It's like, do I want the transient there or not? On a poppy funk song, I want the attack to be, I want to let the transient through. On like a smooth jazz song or something like that, I want the attack to kick in right away. So these guys, I don't hear any kind of crazy poppy funk stuff, so I'm going to keep the attack pretty quick on the bass. Go ahead. We're going to bypass it. it back in. We just have more control over the range of how high it goes, how loud it gets. Maybe it's just slightly overcompressed, so I'm going to bring that threshold up a little bit. Let's move on to the keys. Good, we're good to go. All right, let's go ahead and go to guitar. Let's move on to ukulele while he's figuring that out. Now at the gig, we could have easily stood there and all watched that happen for 10 minutes. Well, let's keep on task and let's get the ukulele figured out. Go ahead. Cool, sounds good to me. Center Vox.
1, 2, hey, 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 yeah, 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 yeah. Check, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, hey, 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 yeah, 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 yeah.
Sounds good. Cool. Key Vox.
Check, check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. Oh, check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2. Oh, check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, check. Oh, check, 1, 2.
Good. Guitar, here we go. Kind of give me your poppy, snappy stuff. There we go. Cool. And where I set that release is going to be depending on is he playing a funky thing or I want it to really pop, I'll have a quick release. If he's playing something slow and finger picky, I'll have a slow release. Now that's something you can't really mess with during a gig, but for recording you certainly can. But for a gig, I try to find somewhere in the middle of those two where I can just set it and forget it. Okay, so we've got all the compression going. So let's go ahead and play another song, guys. Let's listen. And I'm going to keep messing with compressors as I think I need to, or EQ and levels and stuff that we've worked on already.
concept was all but lost, and none could enunciate their thoughts, and even those who did, the brave and few, are now none but soylent green.
Nice job, guys. Cool.